All right, and it's time 12:03. I think that is a good grace time for people to join and actually just get themselves settled. So welcome everybody to Polaris GWAC IDIQ webinar series. My name is Nelson Santini. I'm your host, and this webinar series is sponsored by Trident Proposal Management. Trident Proposal Management is actually a proposal management house and full service team that is actually based out of San Diego. They're sponsoring this event. We're going to talk a little bit about them and with their SMEs. Rebecca, Jeff, and Brandon, who are going to be with us. So today's key points, for the webinar are going to be actually just focus on how to score in as high as possible for the Polaris IDIQ. These are the new topics, and as a reminder, we're going to cover some new topics, and we're going to rehash some of the old topics for those who are joining the series for the first time. But key points for today are going to be how to score the highest points and score the highest points possible as you qualify for Polaris, and also that is related to how to identify the most relevant projects for Polaris. Remember, you can only bid one project per NAICS, and also you want to make sure you make the best selection. So Rebecca has done a fantastic job, on actually dissecting that topic for us. After that, we're going to talk a bit about how Polaris is more like modern dating, what are some of the showstoppers for Polaris, how to get quickly to a bid, no bid decision, and again, talking about the Trident's proven process on how to handle IDIQs. They have a fantastic methodology to discuss with us. And so want to actually just tell you a little bit about Trident Proposal Management. They're a service-disabled veteran-owned small business founded in 2008. They specialize in capture management and proposal support, fantastic work that they provide. Again, it's full services, anything from business development through capture management, proposal support, and they provide all of these services under four major areas: market management, capture management, proposal management and writing, training, coaching, and mentoring. And today we're going to be talking about areas that are related to the capture management, the proposal management, and writing. Speaking today, it's going to be myself, Nelson Santini. I'm one of the members of the team with 20 years on capture management experience in the federal government. I'm a certified product manager, former Navy veteran. With us as well, it's going to be Brandon Haas, as a contract management SME. He's going to be talking a little bit about JVs, and as questions pop up, he'll be addressing those. He's actually a Harvard Business School graduate, working on his doctorate, and former contracting officer. So we have some great talent on board in-house from somebody who has done the job on the other side of the fence, people like the people that you were trying to convince. With us as well, it's going to be Ms. Rika Wayland. She's a capture management SME. She's actually the author of some of the methodologies that we're going to be discussing today. A fantastic, expert in proposal management and capture management as well. She's a Navy veteran with 7 years in proposal and writing management experience, and she's the author of, or the co-author of the Fast Prop methodology. And last but not least, we're also joined by Jeff Everidge, the president and CEO of Trident Proposal Management. He's a former Navy SEAL, senior consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton, director of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he's an expert on oral presentation. He's going to be giving us a perspective on how, basically just qualifying for the Polaris GWAC IDIQ is like modern dating, and some great analogies. To actually just help us look at how we can best qualify for Polaris. On the agenda today, again, just real quick, the new topic is going to be scoring qualification for Polaris, and then we're going to cover the other elements as far as, joint ventures, the overview of the qualification, and again, leaving towards the latter part of the presentation, the topics that some of you may have already listened to, so you can just go back, to lunch or to do something else. And for everybody else who's joining us for the first time, hang back and ask questions that are needed. Like Rebecca mentioned, we're going to have actually just, everybody looking at the chat box. So if you have any questions, please, feel free to ask the questions, raise your hand. I'll do my best to make sure that, nobody's questions get unanswered. And if by some reason we run out of time, we'll come back and make sure that we can cover them, either by email, or also on the website. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I hope that you received the Polaris GWAC IDIQ newsletter that was actually just crafted by the Trident team. If you haven't, please let me know in the chat box to make sure that you can get it. I hope that it was of value. If you received it, please give us some feedback. We'll love to learn more on how to make it better and add better content for you. So looking for feedback on that as well. With that, I'll move on real quickly. And my name is Nelson Santini, and I'll just give you a quick recap of Polaris GWAC IDIQ. It's a GSA-sponsored government-wide solicitation. It's an IDIQ in that, it's going to actually have multiple, task orders being led through it. We expect it to be in the vicinity of about $15 billion, so it's of substantial size. 10 years, large period, 1+4, so a base +4 options with 5 possible extensions after that. It's fully dedicated for small businesses. So it's for women-owned small businesses, hub zones, and also for small businesses in general. It focuses strictly on IT, and it's going to have anywhere between 100 to 200 primes, and expected to be let out in the fall of 2021. So again, so what, again, for a GWAC that is a 10-year IDIQ, all IT for small businesses. Key things, although it will not actually just require you to actually just, have a CAS certified system or a CMMC controls. We're expecting, that those may be part of the task orders. And so you have to be ready. There's some implications that are just beyond the face value, right? And so very important that you actually are planning for what's going to happen after the award. Jeff is going to talk to us about that. We expect that, there are going to be some rapid task orders that you're going to have to steer in. So again, we're going to touch on how you can actually just get some help to make sure you can turn those task orders by the Trident team. And again, if you're looking in the world of IT, that is really broad. And so Rebecca's going to touch about, past performance and how you can shore some of those gaps. It is unlikely that you'll have all of the umbrella cover for the IT, so teaming may be something that you need to do in order to become more relevant for the qualification process in order to do all the tasking. So while we're looking at how to basically build that strategy and qualifying early, we also want to begin to think, how am I going to execute this program to make sure that I'm ready to get the most out of it? So with that said, and as a quick recap, on the Polaris IDIQ, I'm going to turn over the floor to Rebecca Whalen. She's actually just going to walk us through a quick overview on some key elements talking about scoring. And so, Rebecca, with that, I turn it over to you, and I'll just be moving slides at your command, ma'am.
Okay, thanks very much, Nelson. We can go ahead to the next slide. So what I want to make sure I do is give everybody a quick orientation to the type of proposal that Polaris is going to be. If you were here at the very beginning and you saw our kind of placeholder opening slide, we were asking about who has bid on a points-based proposal before, and that's because Polaris is points-based. So what that means for you, if you're not familiar, is that instead of having to write a technical approach or describe a management solution, do a narrative transition plan, anything like that, it's not going to be evaluated on the spectrum of outstanding, satisfactory, unsatisfactory. It's going to be, do you meet the criteria? If so, points are awarded. And this is because of GSA's drive to make proposal evaluations more objective, so fair, and more efficient, fast. And they've been under a lot of scrutiny. If you are familiar with Alliant 2 Small Business, you know that was canceled because there was protest after protest of businesses basically saying, hey, your evaluation criteria wasn't fair, the way that you did the process wasn't fair to everybody. And so every time something like that happens, the GSA tries to learn and get smarter and improve their processes. And so what we're seeing with some of the more recent GWACs is an adaptation and response to those pain points that people have had in competing for these contracts. So there's going to be 6 volumes. We know this because the draft RFP for Polaris is already out. If you've not taken a look at that, I highly encourage you to start digging into the content. We're going to give you a quick summary today, but there's a lot of fine print in that draft RFP. So I'm going to do my best to give you this high-level summary so that you've got at least a baseline understanding, because everything that we're going to talk about in terms of pain points and preparation that you can do now, it's going to make a lot more sense if it's in the context of understanding that you're trying to build points as you prepare your materials. So we'll have a general volume that is the SF-33, some of the more baseline contractual documents. There's 2 volumes, relevant experience and past performance. And we're going to talk about why these are so important in a second. There's a volume 4, which is system certifications and clearances. Not a surprise since this is an IT services contract. Volume 5 is going to be all about risk assessment, how you've performed in the past, what your structure is, things like that. And then volume 6 is responsibility. So taking a look at your cybersecurity practices, your supply chain risk management, and just the financial responsibility of the company and the resources that you have. So I mentioned that we have relevant experience and past performance. I don't want you to think of these things as being important. These are absolutely critical because we expect, based on historical contracts that were built under the same scorecard RFP, that these are going to be worth 70 to 90% of the total score. So it's going to be really important to select the right projects for your relevant experience and your past performance. And just real quick, the difference between those two, relevant experience is experience performing the project and demonstration that you can do or that you have contracts that meet the requirements. Past performance is an evaluation of how well you performed on those contracts. So one is just, do you have the experience? And the other is, do you have experience doing it well? And that's kind of the way to think about those two things. So again, 70 to 90% of the total points on Polaris we expect to be from just those two volumes. So Nelson, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, please. When GSA goes to evaluate all of the bids, it's also important to understand that they're not going to set minimum thresholds for the points. What they're going to do is they're going to look at the three pools, because remember, there's a small business pool, a woman-owned small business pool, a hub zone pool, and within each of those, they're going to look at the top scorers. And they're going to say, okay, instead of taking and establishing a minimum point criteria and anybody who meets that criteria automatically gets an award, they're going to look and say, well, who are the top 50 or 80? We don't know yet how many awardees they're going to be, and we don't know the distribution amongst the pools, but you need to remember that they're going to look top down. And so that's why we want you to maximize your points and try to get as many points as possible, because if you're not up among the top, you're not going to get selected for an award on this. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, and dash your hopes for Polaris. I just want you to be realistic and think through the things that you can do now to maximize those points so that you can put forth a realistic bid and that your resources are going towards an effort well spent, right? Okay, so when you're looking at your relevant experience projects and your past performance contracts for consideration, a couple things I want you to do. One is draft your contract lineup. So you're going to take a look at, just make a list of any contracts that come to mind that you think might qualify as aligning to one of the performance areas that are listed in the draft RFP. And from this list, the reason I want you to get them all consolidated up front rather than, piecemeal this list as you go, is it's just going to be more efficient if you look at all the projects that you have and you start crossing projects off the list. And that's the next step, right, is down select. Anything that doesn't meet the minimum criteria for recency, for relevancy, or for dollar threshold, delete it from the list and don't spend any more of your time or effort trying to develop that into a project. Like, you're not going to be able to change the past, right? What's done is done. What's in paper or what's on paper and it's been contracted is what it is. So if it doesn't meet the 5-year relevancy criteria, if it doesn't align to one of the 5 performance areas, and if it doesn't meet the $1 million threshold, it should come off that list. So whatever you have left over, now you're going to start to look at your projects and rack and stack them. One thing I do want to mention, we don't have a draft scorecard yet from the government. They have not released that. In the draft RFP, they do provide the 5 performance areas and the 6 emerging technology areas, and they have a couple examples of each, but we don't know exactly what the weighting is going to be within these areas. That's okay. You can still get a sense of what your projects do and don't cover at this phase. And one thing I do want to make sure that everybody understands is that you can only use a project to align to one area. So of those 5 performance areas, and by the way, those all align to NICS codes. There's data processing, hosting and related services. There's custom computer programming services, computer systems design services, computer facilities management services, and then there's the other computer related services. So 5 areas, and you have to find a project that aligns. Ideally, you would have one project for each of those 5 areas. The government has limited the number of projects that you can submit to 7 in this category. The other important thing to understand is that, so everything has to meet the minimum criteria, but then there are categories that are going to score you extra points. So for example, if it involved multiple teammates, if you were managing a team of subcontractors, you might get extra points for that. If it was a large dollar value, you would get extra points for that. If it involved an OCONUS location, so something outside of the United States, if you're performing work in Japan, in Hawaii counts as OCONUS, foreign country, something that is outside the contiguous United States, you get extra points for that. So you need to understand, which projects have the potential to score you more points, so that when it comes to the final selection, you know what your best chance of winning those points is. So we're racking and stacking those. And then the next thing you want to do is, so once you know which performance areas are covered, you want to take a look at what you don't have covered. So maybe with your own company's relevant experience and past performance, you can only cover 3 of the 5 areas. You should be looking at those 2 NICS codes or those 2 performance areas that aren't covered and thinking, okay, who can we team with to do that? And by the way, Trident does offer a team finding service. And I say that, not just because I want you to come to us with your business, but because that's going to be the thing you need to do is the strategic teaming in order to max out your scorecard. So you're going to be looking at these gaps, evaluate a bid, no bid. If you are coming up and all of your projects fall under one performance area, that's probably not going to be good enough on your own to submit a bid. So really want you to be aware of where your shortfalls are so that you can start shoring those up now. And then, strengthening that bidding position and considering teaming. Any questions so far? I know that's kind of a quick summary. Okay.
Yeah, and we definitely want to make sure that we actually just pause in here before we move along, right? So this is a new part of the webinar. This part is a new topic, which is all about scoring points. So on the chat, or if you want to raise your hands, I'm just going to let everybody come off mute. Is there anybody who has any particular questions that are related to points and the scoring briefing that Rebecca just gave us in here? Any questions?
Hi, Rebecca. It's Pam. I have a question for you. How you talked about the difference between relevant experience and past performance. How at this juncture, how do you think they're going to evaluate how well you performed on a contract?
Sure. So the past performance is going to be based almost exclusively on CPARs, or if there's no CPARs that are in existence, there's going to be a past performance questionnaire that you send to the government. So it's literally going to be ratings that the government has given you on the contract, and that's how it's going to break out. Does that make sense?
Thanks. That's really cool. Easy. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. And
we also have a question from. I see that we have a question from Alan Langerman. Do you see it, Rebecca?
I do.
And so
yeah.
Read it here. If a project crosses multiple areas, you cannot reuse on multiple areas. So question for you.
And that is correct. So a project can only be used against one performance area, and you can't use your project. This is another really important point. So I'm really glad you asked this question. If you are considering teaming or being on multiple teams, you can't use your project and have it be represented on other contracts. So your contract, you have to think of it as being exclusive to that performance area. And so that's why I really want you to take a look at your projects now, because you might have a project that would potentially cover two performance areas, but you're going to have to pick one to align it to. So, being a little bit strategic about how you align your projects is going to be really important to make sure that you can cover as many sections as possible and score as many points as possible. Does that make sense, Ellen?
All right. And we have another question from Madeline Larkin. Do you have to have a representative project in each NAIC code listed?
Okay, so the short answer is no, but then you're not going to have points, and it's going to be hard to be competitive with that. So the government's not going to say, we're not going to look at proposals unless they cover every single performance area, but you should just know that the strongest competitors or the strongest offers on this are likely going to have a project in every area.
Yeah, pardon me, I just want to pile on. So we're going to be doing a co-hosted presentation with Capture to Proposal, where we're going to show you some stats on the strongest primes out there from a NAICS codes perspective. So stay tuned for that. I just want to plug that. That webinar is coming up in probably a few weeks to a month, I think. Is that right, Nelson?
That's about right. So I think it's for the 16th. So we're going to have a joint webinar with C2P, Capture to Proposal, and that's exactly the topic we're going to be going through, which is looking at past performances, how well did they score, and what was their contribution to their scoring, sample cases, just to give an idea to the audience on what are the things or what are the kind of projects that will yield the highest scoring. So absolutely, and it's a great plug at this time, Jeff. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Okay, no worries. I'd love to have the dialogue again. Ask questions on the chat box. Raise your hand. All those things. We want to have a great dialogue. We're here for you. So with that said, I'm going to then let Rebecca continue because she has the front of the presentation here. So I'm glad that I gave you a quick break. But you're back on deck. So let's just talk about now then about how the qualification process works and evaluating your P-win. So back to you, Rebecca.
Okay, thanks, Nelson. So we talked at the beginning about how I have the capture background, right? And when I came up with these points, I just want you to know that I have a lot of experience with managing proposals, And more importantly, I understand from managing proposals the things that are going to get you in trouble when it comes to actually preparing your response. So that's what this list is. This is a list of things that people are going to get into trouble with, or that they're going to run into, that are avoidable. So stuff I want you to start thinking about now. Not bidding, but for the wrong reasons. This is something that we expect people are going to run into. If you're really busy, or if you're looking at the RFP and you're just feeling kind of overwhelmed, it may be that you're not a good fit for Polaris, but don't count yourself out of running without doing a little bit of the homework, and at least taking a look at the eligibility criteria and taking a look at your projects that you have, or examining teaming as an option. This is going to be a long run, high ceiling IDIQ for IT services, and it's specifically set aside for small businesses. So this is, we just don't want you to count yourself out of the opportunity, or count on an on-ramp later on down the road without making an informed decision. The next thing that I think people are going to get into trouble with is making a faulty bid strategy. So I mentioned that a lot of the criteria is very objective, right? It's very binary, it's black and white. You meet the criteria or you don't. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to throw together a proposal response 2 weeks before it's due. There's going to be a lot of homework that you need to do now to make sure that all of your contract documentation is in order and that you're organized and ready to submit. And then, the other side of that is, it's not just the taking time to prepare the proposal, it's making sure that you are going into this with, in an informed position about what projects qualify and what don't. So this isn't the time to say, well, we've got one really good project, let's just throw it into the ring and see if it works. It's probably not going to. So thinking through, your teaming strategy, thinking through which performance areas you're going to have covered, that's something that we want you to do up front, so that your bid strategy is actually deliberate. I expect people will get into trouble with forming too big or too complex of a team. If you have looked at the draft RFP, there's really specific guidance about all of the admin that you have to provide that shows, what your relationships are, that proves you've done the work you're claiming you've done. And so, you as the prime need to have a very good attention to detail, and so do all of your teammates, because everybody's got to meet the minimum criteria, and everybody has to be in lockstep when it comes to, presenting their compliance and being able to prove that everything that they're claiming is actually what's happening. So the other thing that I want you to keep in mind when you're forming your team is that it doesn't help to have teammates who are stacking experience in one project area. Again, coverage across all the performance areas is going to be a better strategy than having 3 teammates that all have a performance, or that all cover the same performance area, because you're going to max out points just based on the way that they have the draft RFP structured. Other things that people are going to get into trouble with is not preparing in the right way and not understanding the difference between a claim and evidence. And what I mean by this is that there is a difference. If you have to submit your statement of work, there's a difference if the government says that work may include performance outside of the country versus something that says performance will take place outside of the country. So there's little language nuances that exist in contract documentation that you want to be aware of now. So if you're counting on proving OCONUS performance just based on what's in the statement of work, you're going to want to take a look at that and make sure that it actually does say what you think it says. Along with that, the government has allowed contract deliverables like monthly status reports or staffing reports, or things that you provide to the government as an official deliverable. They have allowed companies to submit that as evidence. I would expect that they do that, or that they will do that for Polaris as well. We're still kind of waiting on that finalization. And I'm sure it's one of the questions that's been asked that we haven't seen a response to yet. But I mention that now because if you don't have something explicitly stated in your statement of work, but it's substantiated in a deliverable, like that might be enough to get you credit in one of those point scoring categories, but only if it's all tightened up in terms of meeting the standard of evidence. So what by that I mean, like, does it have the contract number on it? Does it explicitly state who's doing what and where they're doing it? And if it doesn't, you have time now to put that into a deliverable to get it signed off on by the government, so that you're not trying to trace down or track down evidence that isn't there, and you're not trying to manufacture it once the RFP is live, because by then it's going to be too late. So taking stock now of what your documents actually say, making sure that they prove the things that you are going to say that they prove, can save you some headaches down the road. Another thing, it would be ignoring the emerging tech and those kind of projects. So the primary performance areas, those are the ones that we want to make sure you have covered, and there's $1 million thresholds for those. For the emerging technology, there's 6 emerging technology areas. The project threshold is much lower. I think it's $150,000, and it's because these are the more innovative side of things. This comes second in the RFP, and the project values are less, but don't be fooled into thinking that these are not still important. Again, the most attractive offer to the government is going to be a team that can cover all of the performance areas and has demonstrated experience against as many of the emerging technology areas as possible. And then the last thing that we expect to see teams, get tripped up by is expecting work without the work. Getting on the IDIQ is kind of just the first step, and in some ways, it's the easy part of this process. Even though there's going to be some stiff competition, getting on the IDIQ, in order to actually get work and not get off-ramped because you're not meeting the minimum contracting thresholds, you're going to have to put in a significant amount of time and investment to make sure that you're steering customers to use this IDIQ so that you're competitive at the task order level, and that you're meeting the thresholds each year to make sure that you don't, to make sure that your company is set up for long-term success. So your goal here should not be just getting an award on Polaris. It should be positioning for the long-term success, whether that's making business development investments now, whether that's forming strategic teams, but looking down the road and saying, okay, what do we need not just to get onto Polaris, but to stay on Polaris and make it work for us so that it's not just a headache and this thing that becomes a massive time suck and resource suck on our company. Any questions about that?
And while you're thinking of the questions, because I'm sure you may have some, I'm actually going to put in a shameless plug, here. So I want you to take a look at the URL down below, tridentproposals.com/blog. Within their blog, you guys are going to find out a fantastic set of blogs that basically just go into all of these topics in further detail. Rebecca has done a fantastic job. They have videos. They have actually other instruments that will be really helpful. We're going to briefly touch on a couple of checklists that Rebecca and her team have developed to help you just figure out what's a good past performance. Don't want to steal her thunder, but please take the time to visit, tridentproposals.com/blog. And again, great resources so you can see this in full detail. Second thing that I like to offer is for all of those things, that you have here, Rebecca and the Trident team, also on board, you'll have Brandon who's going to be presenting afterwards. Great resources to look and help you evaluate your past performance, your claims versus evidence, right? These are things that they do day in and day out. They can act as a third-party observer and help you, basically to see if you have the best case, the best foot forward. So take them up on those opportunities or to learn a Trident proposal. So any specific questions before we move from the slide to some of the tools that Rebecca and her team have developed? All right, then Rebecca, over to you.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Nelson. And like you mentioned, we do have some free checklists that are on our website that you can download if you're looking to do this just basic eligibility check. The first thing before you put any effort towards bidding on Polaris is making sure that you don't have any showstoppers, right? So we've developed a really user-friendly checklist that just walks you top to bottom through the basic eligibility criteria. Anything in red, we want you to stop and take a look at because it's either a disqualifier and a showstopper, or it's something you're going to have to figure out a workaround for. So if you have any issues here, if you have any questions, please reach out. We'd be happy to help you run through this. But yeah, Nelson's just showing a zoomed in view now where, it's really user-friendly. It's dead simple. And this is based on the criteria that are in the draft RFP. So it just walks you through each category that you're going to have to think through. The next thing we have is it's an actual project evaluation sheet. And there's 2 of these on our website. One is for the primary experience areas, and the other is tailored specifically for an emerging technology project. And what I want you to do is I would run this checklist against every project that you're considering. Again, we don't know the specific point breakdown yet, but we almost don't need to, right? Because you just need to know what's in your projects and what they cover or what they don't cover, so that when we do get numerical values, we can plug those in and it becomes a math problem about, which project is going to score you the most amount of points. Any questions about this? Like I said, they're on our website. They're free to download. They're tools for you to use to really help you get organized at the onset while we still have some runway before that proposal calendar starts.
Absolutely. Great tools, and certainly recommend for everybody. You have the URLs. And if you actually just get to the blogs, within the blogs at the bottom, you'll find links to all of the tools, so you guys can download them, again, free of charge. And with that said, if there are no questions, we'll move along to the next topic, which was actually complementary. So Rebecca was talking about the different cases, how to score points, and she addressed the fact that sometimes you may be gapped. Sometimes you may need to basically just have a teammate, by a coalition or a joint venture. And so Brandon Haas is going to give us a brief overview. This was in the previous topics. Brandon, again, one of the subject matter experts, a former contracting officer. And so Brandon, can you do me an audio check, please?
How do you hear me?
All right. Read you nice and clear, sir. So you're up.
All right. So again, last 2 weeks ago, we talked about the joint ventures. If you missed that, so I'll just go over the definition real quick. So a JV, joint venture, is when two businesses or individuals team up, and here's the key word, they form a new entity, LLC, informal, incorporated, unincorporated, just a combination of the two companies coming to one for a brief period, usually 2 years. You can get extensions, and it's essentially for combining the skill sets, past performance history. They may be able to make IT equipment in-house. So it's combining these two entities to form one for your chances to get onto the Polaris or other contracts as necessary. So that's the definition of a joint venture. And we'll continue. And so the key implications are, in order to keep the small business size standards, we have to be 51% owned by a small business, hub zones, woman-owned, veteran-owned, etc., in order to keep those size standards. So you can JV with a large business, but the small business has to be 51% owned of that entity. 40% limits. So 40% has to be done by the JV. The work has to be done by the JV. The other 40% can be split between the two companies, and the remainder needs to be or could be subcontracted. Past performance of both companies can be used, one or the other, both. It's up to you. 2-year commitment. So with JVs, you have that 2-year entity creation, and the extensions, depending on your CO, KO, can extend that if need be. But again, it's the legality aspect of it. So you also have to renew your JV documents too. And again, it's not permanent. So those are the key implications of a JV. And any questions, we'll definitely get into more thorough topics about JVs and teaming here shortly, I believe. Is that right, Nelson?
That's right. So this is just a teaser. And again, just to cover the topic, from joint ventures and teaming. On the next webinar, we're actually just going to have a broader section that's going to be dedicated to JVs, teamings. And also in the newsletter, we're going to have a section that is, again, going to basically just go into further detail for you guys to read some of the recommendations from the Trident team and the experts on how to go about this. So thank you, Brandon. Before we move into the last section of the webinar, any specific questions for Brandon related to contracts, teaming, or anything related to the discipline of contracts from anybody in the team? Any questions? Nothing. Again, you can continue to ask questions. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Jeff Everts. He's the president and CEO of Trident Proposals, and he's going to basically just take us through the end about some additional information related to Polaris GUIs and the process. Jeff, you want to take control? I'm going to pass it over to you real quick, and let's see if you can actually just take it. We're beginning to share. Let's see.
Yeah. Do you guys see me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And awesome. Well, thank you, Nelson. And I just want to do a shout out to Brandon, Nelson, and Rebecca for putting this really great webinar on. I can't imagine anyone better to be on your guys' team to help you get that award to get on Polaris or get on a team. And we'll talk about those two strategies here in a second. So again, I'm Jeff Evers. I'm the president of Trident Proposals, and so happy that you guys are here. Going to talk a little bit about the courses of action and our proven process for getting on GWACs like Polaris. So you have really 4 actions here, 4 possibilities. Oh, it looks like we have a question for the end, so I will get it done so we can have time for that question. So you have first the no bid, and that's an option that is really good to figure out early. And I'm going to talk to you why that's important and why it's a little bit like dating actually as well. And then you can be part of a team, and being part of a team requires early action as well, because what we know is that the qualified primes tend to solidify their team really early on, and there is a little bit of risk of onboarding new teammates. So you want to make sure you have a really good case for being onboarded as a teammate for Polaris as well. So you want to start thinking about both of these options really early and not wait till the last minute to do that. You can bid alone, which is one of the options that the powerhouse small business IT firms are going to do. And again, we have a capture to proposal joint data-rich webinar coming up that you definitely want to be a part of, because we're going to talk about some of the primes and what those primes are going to look like, the winning primes will look like. No, excuse me, there's one more, which is build a team. Didn't want to go by that too fast. So some primes will need to do JVs. Some primes will have a pretty strong approach to winning, or pretty strong bid position, but we'll need to bring on teammates as well so that they can win. So that's the last option, and that's for folks that know they can prime or think they can prime, but need just to build that team up or put that JV together so they can do with large business, so they can make sure that they get a spot on Polaris. So with that, I'm going to go into our proven process. And so this is where I make a joke that GSA, Polaris, and bid decisioning is a little bit like dating in the modern world, because you have all this information that you've gotten from us, right? But you don't want to drag out the process of deciding whether you're going to bid or not, in which one of those 4 decisions you're going to make: the no bid, the bid alone, the build a team, those types of things, right? And why is it like dating? It's because you don't want to drag some person along in a bunch of dates if it's not going to work out. You'd like to just get done with that particular person and move to the next person until you find the right person, right? So it's the same idea. And we have this proven process, which has a decision point that we want to get you to as quickly as possible. So first, you're going to do the eligibility check. This is absolutely something that you can do on your own, or we can help you through it. And there are showstoppers that make you ineligible, period. And then there are things that you can wait until you bid, or even wait till you win, to fix. And our eligibility checklist will take you through that and the recovery actions that you need so that you can bid. Then you want to do your project ID and gap analysis. Rebecca talked a lot about how you're going to score yourself. And we're going to, we have scoring sheets, we have gap analysis forms, we have a project evaluation form to see if your project's even qualify in the first place. And so these 2 things get you to a prime sub decision point. And if you're not going to prime, if you're going to sub, you can hit us up for our Prime Finder service. And Rebecca talked a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about this particular service and pricing on the next slide. So then after that is the rest of the process. This is really the heavy lift here, is the proposal prep and submission. You get the award, but then this is where we say the real work comes. So when opportunity knocks, hard work answers, and that's the capture and propose on task orders process. So after you win, really the hard work of positioning yourself to win task orders on Polaris happens after that. And we have a whole bunch of stuff that's not necessary now, but a whole bunch of services and free downloads that we can give you on standing up that PMO to get ready for the onslaught of task orders from Polaris. So I just want to this is the quick part where Trident talks about what we'll do for you, how we can move you forward in this process, why outsource bid decision support is important, right? And so one thing is you might consider outsourcing just so you don't drink your own Kool-Aid, because we found through, 13-year-old company. We probably drafted, probably on the order of 600 or 700 past performances for our clients in the bidding of contracts. And what we've learned is that there's a lot of like, well, we think this past performance will cover this area. And until we actually dig in, you don't know. So you don't want to drink your own Kool-Aid on this, and having an outside person like Rebecca or Brandon or Nelson or I looking at your projects is going to give you a lot of clarity on whether that project's going to make it to the bid or not. Optimize staff for revenue. So this is something that most small businesses don't think of, but why would you pull your performing staff off of contracts and stop them earning revenue to help you write something like a GSA Polaris bid? Why not instead hire someone and keep your staff optimized and happy and not working nights and weekends, and keep you optimized and happy and not working nights and weekends, and have us do the heavy lift for you? It makes a lot of sense. There's a financial case to outsource this sort of work for that. By the way, your team is too busy and they have better things to do. Fact is that you as leaders and managers of your companies, you guys are too busy. You have better things to do. And finally, you want to get this whole thing done. And you want to get on team fast. And sometimes finding a team can be one of the hardest parts of this process. So bottom line, decide early and get the outsourced service. Trident happens to do this. I'm sure there's other companies that will help you with Polaris as well. But let us help you make this bid decision quickly and figure out which direction you're going to go, so that you can stop messing with thinking about it and start acting toward doing it. That's the idea. So we have two things to offer you today. One is Prime Finder. Rebecca talked about that a bit. This is totally risk-free. It's $500, so it's really cheap. And all you do is we do an interview with you. We'll assess you from the perspective of what you have to offer, and then we'll work toward moving you into a sub position on a prime contract or for the prime contractor. Bottom line, if we don't find you a winning prime, we'll just give you your money back. So there's no risk there. And then if you're on the fence about bidding, or if you want to see how well you position for a prime bid, then that's our Polaris bid decision. And that's literally just taking you through that scoring process and giving you our opinion on whether you should bid or not. That's $2,000. And that will automatically, if you decide not to bid, will automatically put you in the Prime Finder as well. So if you want any of those services at all, there's 4 emails for you. Literally just email us. We will have a quick call with you and decide which one of these works for you, or if either works for you. It really just make it a personality contest. Whoever you want to talk to, you can talk to Nelson, Rebecca, myself, or Brandon, and you can also just schedule some time and ask us questions in private as well if you don't want to ask a question in public. So with that being said, I'm going to stop.
We got some questions.
Leave this up. Yeah, sure.
Well, okay, so we got some questions. First one's from Matthew Tilley to everyone. Says, Brandon and Rebecca, have either of you seen any mention of limits of projects coming from the mentor within a mentor-protege JV?
So I want to ask a clarifying question for this one, just so I understand. Are you saying if you're, sorry, let me think about what my clarifying question is. Are you going to be bidding as a JV, or were you part of a JV and you're looking to use one of those projects?
Let's see, Matthew. I'm taking him up. I said, there you go. He's coming up mute. There you go.
Hey, Rebecca. So we would be bidding as a JV, and I probably should have clarified the question is not just about projects, but also past performance.
Yeah, so it's permissible, and Brandon, keep me honest here. You can use projects from either the mentor or the protege in that case, as long as you're an official JV.
Mm-hmm. And
Brandon, any other caller?
Yeah, I just want to clarify here. So we have to separate the legality of the mentor protege, because that's actually an SBA program, and a JV is a legal entity. So it's one or the other. If you are a mentor protege, yes, you can use either or. If you're a JV, you're a combined entity, so you can use either or as well.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Matt.
Sorry, just to clarify here also, as a small business mentor, protege, if you're in that program, the SBA says that you're only allowed to use 2 in your lifetime of the program for limits of a mentor. And with that being said, you can still graduate if you win all these awards. You still graduate from the program, making you a large business, therefore eventually kicking you out of Polaris. So just to clarify.
Gotcha. So the limits are not the past performances or relevant experiences that you can use. The limit that you mentioned was actually how many mentor protege relationships you can have in your lifetime.
Yes.
Check. That's good. Great question. Okay. Rebecca has also posted actually, some good G2 on the chat box. Take a look at it for everybody. Then the next question from Robert Gagan, and he says, his question is, can ANCs participate as a small business?
And I just want to clarify, is that Alaska Native Corporation?
Yes.
Just want to use a lot of acronyms in the Navy, so I don't want to. I don't want to assume.
Right. So ANCs, Alaska Native corporations, are a sub-social category of a small business. So I assume that being an ANC, you're already a small business. So yes, you can participate. You can also have a large business with a Alaska corporation. But if you exceed that NAICS code, then you are therefore out of the run.
Yeah, and just to drive this point home, everybody that bids on Polaris, whether you are the prime or a part of a team, you have to be considered a small business within the 541512 NAICS code, and it needs to be registered as such or reflected as such in SAM. So every single entity of any shape, size, or variety must be a small business in that NAICS code.
That's right.
Yeah, and again, not a subtle detail, but to state the obvious, as last part that Rebecca mentioned, you have to update your SAM's record, right? Because if you don't, you can have a perfect proposal. I've seen it happen, and then basically just be told by the KO, yeah, you're not qualified. Your NAICS was not updated in SAM. It's a really painful experience. Please allow me to spare you from it. So just take a look at your SAM records to make sure you keep them updated. Okay, yes. Other questions from the team. Let's see here. Any other questions? Great questions and great discussion. While we're at it and while we're thinking about other questions, I want to let everybody know, again, we have the Polaris newsletter, which is going to cover these topics in full detail for you guys to read at your convenience as well. You can access the newsletter through the blog. So tridentproposals.com/blog. You can actually just see the blogs. We'll have links to the newsletter there. Also, by registering, you're going to be getting that newsletter. If you receive that, please give us some feedback. Let us know what topics you like, what you don't like, changes and recommendations. Again, this is your newsletter for us to, basically to share with you the knowledge that we have. So please let us know how you need to see it. Any recommendations will be greatly appreciated.